Greetings. Well, today I want to talk to you about Putin and Russia. The situation is developing in a way that is not overly aggressive on the Russian part, and the American influence is not as visible in Ukraine because the Obama administration has no interest whatsoever in the situation in Ukraine. But let me assure Americans that this is the greatest crisis that America has faced since the Second World War. A person, another Hitler, is annexing and aggressing against a neighbor state. I think we ought to make a separation between the Russian people who have been captured since 1970. It's going to be 100 years captured by communists, and they should be treated as a captive society, a society currently uh, uh, in the power of a lunatic in Kremlin. And the lunatic has nuclear weapons. This is not Khrushchev, who was a family man. This is not Brezhnev, who was also a family man. Also, they had a mafia kind of society. And Khrushchev and Brezhnev, when they took over from Stalin, tried to achieve stable relations between America and Russia. Russia then was much poorer than it is now. There was no Twitter, no Facebook in the age of Brezhnev, and there was no global economy, so it was harder to influence the regime. And vast territories could be held in bondage outside the international system. Today it is harder. But Putin is the heir of Stalin. He's a mix between Stalin and Al Capone. That is what he is. And I want to issue a warning to him and to Russia that they can't win. This is a game that has been started by America with the overthrow of the Russian stooge in Ukraine, and it caught the whole world by surprise. I think nobody expected that this would happen. I think Ukraine and Belarus were firmly in the Russian orbit, and all of a sudden, when Putin had his Hitlerian games, his Hitlerian Olympic Games in Sochi, the attack in Ukraine was achieved, the overthrow, the coup. But of course, with great participation of the Ukrainian nation. It is easy for America to inflame the Ukrainians against Russians because the political system of this mix between Stalin and Al Capone results in a lot of aggrieved people and a lot of people who are not pleased with the situation. So it is easy to organize a Maidan or something. So Putin's Olympic Games in Sochi remind me of Hitler's Olympic Games in Berlin in 1936. And you have to know that 3 years after the World War started, we are now very close, I think, to a world war. And if Putin is not overthrown from within, there is no telling what he may do. Because although he is unaware of the situation in the world, he was a lowly KGB clerk during the 80s. The whole elite of the Soviet Union was accepted the Western values and were converted to the free markets and an open political system. I'm talking about Yakovlev, I'm talking about Gorbachev, I'm talking about Yeltsin. Those people understood that it is impossible to have a strong state whilst having a communistic economy. Simply the resources could not be created to fight a global fight. And the Soviet Union, of course, collapsed suddenly in 1991. But this is a kind of society where there is no rule of law, where there are no human rights, where the people are treated simply as cattle. And only 8 or 9 years after Yeltsin came to power, the KGB did everything in its power to say that the woes that Russia had in that period were simply the result of neoliberalism, as they call it. It was the result of shock therapy and of economic liberalism. When Putin took over, the price of oil was not so high, and the first 4 years of his rule, until he captured Khodorkovsky, where there were economic reforms, tax reforms, led by Larionov and the other economic Kasyanov. Tax rates were lowered, the tax code was simplified, and of course with the rise in the price of oil, it was not so hard for Russia to have an economic resurgence in the manner where the state employees, of which there are of course many in Russia, teachers, doctors, officials of various kinds, saw their income grow. Their pay came on time, and it grew during the first 8 years of the Putin regime. Of course, in 2008, the economic and financial crisis came. There was a banking crisis, but the price of oil kept growing and was sustained at a high level until 1940, when Russia attacked Ukraine. Then suddenly the price of oil started falling, and I think there's no doubt about it. The American empire was fixing the price of oil to weaken the Putin dictatorship. Now, what will happen next? As I said, Putin is not a smart person. He does not understand what is going on in the world with globalism, with overwhelming American military force that is present on all continents. It is a new global empire in the making, and the only two significant obstacles for America to achieve global supremacy are Russia and China, nobody else. The Islamic threat is a non-threat. ISIS and the Taliban were created by the CIA, and the funding for them can be easily cut off when their usefulness expires. But Russia and China present a different kind of threat because these are states. They are new in the sense that the current political forms that exist in those countries have been created in 1949 in China and in 1917 in Russia, with a very important modifications that occurred in Russia in the early 19th, and in China the reform was from the death of Mao to the death of Deng. There were also important modifications to the Chinese communist system, but these countries are still communist. Communist Party is the ruler of China, and the KGB is still the ruler of Russia. So America, as I said, needs to conquer these two countries if a global system of liberal democracy is to be achieved, and that is certainly the goal of America for various reasons. So the economic might is still overwhelmingly on the side of America and its allies. If you compare the GDP of America, the EU, Japan, South Korea, you will see that it is many times greater than the combined GDP of China and Russia. But China and Russia have vast territorial empires, and what I'm afraid of is that in this situation, I think he understands now that he's cornered. Putin is cornered. He might take drastic action. He has divorced his spouse, and he's a kind of a lonely man living in his palace outside Moscow. His mafia friends must be who are primitive KGB low-level clerks, just like him. They must be dissatisfied with this state where they can't purchase property in London or transfer funds from Russia, from pillaging Russia to the West so easily. Nor is their money safe in the West as it used to be. So I really think that Putin understands that he is in dire straits and that there is no way out. And when you corner somebody who is as aggressive and Darwinian as Putin, you may expect drastic response. Russia has already started to say that to use North Korea-like threats with their nuclear arsenal, but that is the only only strength that they have right now, comparative strength. There is no economy in Russia, there is no political uh, unity in Russia, there is no combat readiness in Russia because there are no ideals for which the Russians could lay down their lives. And the only response to this attack that Putin has experienced in Ukraine is the use of nuclear weapons. I don't think that people see that Putin has lost the plot. He was goaded by America to pillage Russia, to transfer as much money as possible into London and Switzerland and Cyprus, all kinds of Virgin Islands. All that money is now under the control of the American empire, and Russian mafia elite, I think, cannot continue to channel and funnel money into such different financial and tax havens. So, as I said, the only option that is open to Putin is nuclear warfare. This is very serious, and I think that people underestimate the possibility that Russia might use the nuclear weapons against primarily Europe, but then also the United States. I'm not in favor of such a conflagration because it really may destroy the civilization of the world. But if the calculation, as Mao said, I don't care about nuclear war because there are 800 million of us. If you attack us with the nuclear bombs, 400 million will certainly remain. That kind of logic could be used by these two forces, Russia and China, to attack the American empire on all fronts. But the problem is that the communist elite of China, depraved as it is firmly still, since the time of Nixon and Kissinger, and Brzezinski also participated. The Chinese Communist Party is very firmly allied with the United States, and they are not taking steps which would lead to their joint attack on the American empire. So Russia stays alone, and as I think that there is no way out for Putin, he may use the nuclear card and attack the United States and Europe and Japan and all its allies in the world. So this is a warning. I have A and B. A is Putin is trapped, and B, when you trap a wild animal, there is no telling what it may do.